Shirley, do we have closed captioning on this one?
We can, yeah.
Shirley or Jody, will I see on my screen the number of participants that have been let in?
John, if you just click on your participants tab at the bottom,
Yeah.
that'll open the window.
Oh,
In the
yeah,
upper right, you'll see attendees. There are now 22 joined.
okay. There we go. Just before we start, for those that have already joined us, just to let you know, we're just going to give it a minute or two for other people to join before we start the meeting. All right, I don't see that number moving in the last minute or so, so I think we'll get started. Just to let you know, I'm John Woodford, Director of Planning and Development with the Municipality of East Hants, and this is a public information meeting we're holding tonight to talk about two applications, a proposal from Dr. David Sheehy in Shubenacadie and a proposal from FH Developments in Elmsdale. So the way this will work, we're going to deal with one application at a time. First, we're going to deal with the Dr. Sheehy application. Staff, in this case, Rachel Gilbert, our manager of planning, will go through a staff presentation. Then if the applicant wants to say anything, he'll have the opportunity to do so. And then we open up for comments and questions. And we won't be monitoring the chat function on your on Zoom tonight. Instead, we're asking you to use the Q&A function. And Jody MacArthur, our communications officer here, will monitor those, and then she'll monitor them so that, for example, if they're two very similar questions, she'll just kind of rephrase them for us so that, you know, the repetition is sort of taken out of it. Also on the call tonight, we have Shirley Mitchell-McEwen, our assistant clerk, and then we also have representing the applicants. For the first one, Dr. Sheehy is with us. And on the second application, we have Faisal Al-Hamadi from FH Developments, Crystal Fuller and Aaron Ferguson, the planning consultants for FH, and Andrew Forsyth, who's their engineering consultant. So unless I missed something, Jody, I'll let Rachel take it away and we'll go through that first presentation.
Yeah, just that all questions come through the Q&A, which I think you mentioned, John, and
Yep.
I'll keep an eye on them. So
Okay,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, can you see the presentation, John?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, so this application was received from Dr. David Sheehy, and he is the property owner. And the applicant has operated the Shubenacadie Health Centre since 1993. The health centre is now closed, which was closed in November 2020, and the property owner has been looking for another physician to take over the clinic. You can see the building in the left, the bottom side of the slide. It's the white building, single-story building. He's been trying to attract another physician to the clinic to continue on as a medical practice for the last 4 to 5 years, but he's been unsuccessful. The property was changed to a medical clinic following the development agreement with the municipality in 1993, and previously the building was used as a residential building. We can also see here on the bottom right corner of the screen, there's an aerial photograph showing the building here, which is highlighted just here in red. The subject land is located on highway number 2 in Shubenacadie, and on the property there is an existing single-story building. To the west is an Anglican church, and the building to the east of the property is an existing residential and commercial building operating as Papa K's Pizza. The building to the rear of the property is an existing residential use. So it just gives you an overview of what's in the surrounding area. The zoning for the property is high-risk floodplain, which is identified by the kind of bluey green color. And then across the road, we have a small area of R1 zoning, some institutional use, and this is highway commercial land, but the majority of the land in that area is high-risk floodplain. So the initial purpose of the application was to enable the applicant to convert the building to a single unit dwelling so that he can sell the property. And that's how the application started. So the property, as I mentioned, is located in the high-risk floodplain zone where no permanent structures are permitted except for public work structures associated with the provision of pipe services, or unless the structure is accessory to the lawful existing main use of the property. So the existing use and structures are considered non-conforming, and they were also non-conforming prior to the adoption of the 2016 Land Use Bylaw. Change to residential, which is not permitted in the zone, from existing non-conforming use is not enabled under the existing policies and regulations of the official community plan. So the applicant is requesting the change in our planning documents, municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to enable him to change the property over from a medical centre to residential use. So that means we have to change our policies and regulations to allow this to, or enable this to happen. So the policy change will affect all properties in the high-risk floodplain zone. So it won't just affect the application's property, it will affect all the properties that are identified in that high-risk floodplain zone. So there are high-risk floodplain zone properties in Shubenacadie and all the way up along the Shubenacadie River, all the way up to Enfield. So the Municipal Government Act sets out that the municipal planning strategy can allow for the change in use of a non-conforming use of land or a non-conforming use in the structure to another non-conforming use. So currently our municipal planning strategy doesn't allow for that to happen. In this zone, regulations to limit development in a high-risk floodplain are intended to protect the property owners, but also to enable the lands to function as an area where flood waters can flow freely, which helps to protect other areas from flooding. And once the land use or buildings are no longer in operation, there is an opportunity to remove the existing and potentially the building from the area. So this does, however, have an impact on existing property owners and creates a potential hardship for these people. So the non-conforming uses in a high-risk floodplain zone, they are different to other zones with non-conforming uses, as there is no opportunity to use the building for any other use, as all buildings and uses of buildings are prohibited unless it's for public work structures related to the provision of pipe services. And this isn't the case in other zones where you have a non-conforming use. If you needed to change to a different use in that other zone, there are other uses that you could fall back on, but in the high-risk floodplain zone, there isn't that opportunity. The amendments are drafted. They look at how to deal with other non-conforming uses as well, not just changing to residential. So as I mentioned, there are a number of properties in the high-risk floodplain zone, which are throughout along the Shubenacadie River, which are currently not in residential uses, and we counted 22 of those properties. The draft amendments will enable these properties to change to residential use as they are non-site specific. So there is an opportunity to consider other amendments regarding other non-conforming uses. And these amendments are also relevant to other properties with existing buildings in the high-risk floodplain zone. So amendments are proposed that, so there's the first part is a non-conforming use be permitted to change to a non-conforming single unit residential as of right. the permits will still be required. So any existing basements will not be permitted to be used for habitable space. So what this means is that if these amendments that are proposed go through, if anyone has an existing non-conforming use in the high-risk floodplain zone, they could, if the amendments are in place, come in and apply for a permit to change over to a residential use. So for other non-conforming uses in the high-risk floodplain zone, could be considered by development agreement. So this would say that the existing non-conforming use shall not have been discontinued for a continuous period of 2 years. So they have to establish that the use has been on that property for within the last 2 years. Uses which are restricted in the moderate risk floodplain overlay zone will not be considered. So the moderate risk floodplain zone limits uses that have a potential risk to persons. So a residential day home, and there are also some hazardous commercial uses which are also restricted in the moderate risk floodplain zone. So these are the uses that won't be able to be changed over in that high risk floodplain zone. And then the use shall be compatible with the local area uses. So this allows council to look at what's appropriate for that particular area. And then any existing basement shall only be used for storage, mechanical equipment, or other types of non-habitable space. And the main structure containing the non-conforming use may be extended, enlarged, or altered up to 25% of its original gross floor area. And this is the same as other non-conforming uses in other areas of the municipality. So the application will consider whether the opportunity to remove the use from the floodplain is in the best interest of the municipality, or whether council wish to see policies and regulations to enable a new use in existing buildings. So public information meetings required for amendments to the municipal planning strategy, and that's where we are tonight. There is no right of appeal on this application, so council's decision is final. And you can see from the flow chart here, we are at the public information meeting tonight. The next step will be to request first reading of those amendments. And if first reading is given, questionnaires will be sent to properties within 300 meters of the applicant's property. We'll be requesting comments from internal departments and external agencies. There'll be a staff evaluation, and then finally a public hearing. And then at the public hearing, there'll be an opportunity for the public to engage at this time too. And then council either approves or refuses the application. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. And actually, it was in my notes, and I did forget to mention it at the beginning that a public information meeting is exactly what it sounds like. It is for information sharing from staff and the applicant to the public, so there are no decisions made. It's not a council or planning advisory committee meeting. It is just a staff presentation and our ability, I guess, to answer questions that we can at this stage, although for both applications, it is quite early. So with that, Dr. Sheehy, I think in the beginning you indicated that you weren't going to make a presentation unless there were any questions. So if that's still the case, I guess we'll move on. And Jody, are there any questions or comments that have been posted?
I don't see any yet, but if anyone does have a question or comment, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen here, and I can ask those questions of our staff or Dr. Sheehy. So I don't see any, John.
Okay, going once, going twice. All right, I guess no questions about that one. Okay, I guess we'll move on. Thank you for those that were tuning in for that first application, and Dr. Sheehy, thank you for attending. Okay, now we'll move on to the FH Developments proposal, and again, I'll push back to Rachel for the staff presentation.
So the application relates to 3 large properties between Elmwood Drive and Ralston Drive and Pine Hill Drive. You can see Elmwood Drive just along here, and the application Ralston Drive will link through to Elmwood Drive through here. We have Pine Hill Drive, Beach Beach Street and Lorna Court just down here. There is one small parcel of land just here, which will enable access through to Ralston Drive. The land is designated walkable comprehensive development district, but is zoned two dwelling unit zone. And this provides flexibility for either a walkable comprehensive development district application, which is currently being considered, we're discussing tonight, or a regular subdivision. So if a regular subdivision was to be submitted, the developer could, as of right, submit a subdivision application and link through existing streets, so Beach Street, Elmwood Drive, Ralston. They could all be connected to, subject to approval from the Department of Transportation for the provincial side of roads, but essentially this R2 zoning does allow for that to be done as of right. And R2 is single and 2 unit dwellings, so it allows for either semis, duplexes, or single units. The properties are approximately 31 hectares in size. And a walkable comprehensive development district allows for a mixture of housing types, parks, and open space conservation areas and utility uses. Roads will link Elmwood Drive through to Ralston Drive, Beach Street, and Pine Hill Drive. And the proposed street network could be done now through the subdivision process, which I just briefly mentioned. A traffic impact study has been completed and is being reviewed by the Provincial Transportation Department. And there's a table here that just shows some of the numbers of units that are being proposed. So we have 121 of the 34-foot frontage single family dwellings. 40-foot frontage, we have 39. Single family total is 160. And then we have 75 semi-detached, 12 townhouses, 2 multi-unit residential areas with a total of 304 units, and then there's a total of 662 units for the developments. So the site plan here. So we have the road, as I mentioned, Elmwood Drive linking through to Ralston Drive, and then some linking into Beach Street, this side and this side here. This side of the development is the 40-foot frontage single family dwellings. And then we have the 30-foot frontage single family dwellings all the way around here. Hopefully you can see my cursor there. Then we also have semi-detached dwellings being proposed in the purple area, and townhouses to the back, which will back onto the 102. And these two areas, this one here and this one here down the bottom, are multi-unit buildings, all 4-story multi-unit buildings. You can see there's a dashed line just here. This shows a non-disturbance area, which covers this area back here. And then there's also a non-disturbance area here, which will provide some buffering for the multi-unit buildings to any adjacent properties. We have proposed right now, we have 2 open space or parkland areas, one here and one here. Just a note though that the municipality is reviewing as part of the whole review package, we do review open spaces and parklands that are proposed. So, we don't know at this point whether there will be any changes or, through the negotiation process, what that might look like, but that's what we have right now. We also have proposed asphalt active transportation trail, which is this dark line just here, following through all the way through from Elmwood to Ralston. And then the dash line, which is on the other side of the Elmwood Drive extension, and then also all the way down along the other streets. That's a 1.8 meter wide concrete sidewalk. And the asphalt trail is 3 meter wide asphalt trail. What else can I tell you about the site plan? We have this area here has been identified as phase 1 of the development. And then, so this is where the developer intends to start the developments and build from there. So these are the multi-unit residential concept plans. So this is, if I'll just go back to my previous screen and I can show you where these 4 are located up in this corner here. So we have these 4 multi-unit residential buildings. And in those, as I said, they are 4-story in height. And we have 4 buildings with a total number of units of 216 units. These 2 buildings here, I'm just going to go back to this plan. This is down here in this end of the development. And this one, there's 2 buildings, 4 stories, and a total number of 88 dwelling units. You can see here just some elevation drawings of some designs that the applicant has submitted for the elevations for those 2 buildings, or sorry, for the multi-unit buildings. Council has designated the land as walkable comprehensive development district in the municipal planning strategy, and this designation enables the zoning to remain in place until such a time as landowners come forward with a proposal to enable the WCDD through a development agreement, and that WCDD stands for Walkable Comprehensive Development District. The designation expresses council's willingness to encourage this type of development, and within each of those WCDD sites will be the ability to implement a variety of land uses, including residential, comprised of varying densities, and institutional, open space, and commercial uses. No commercial uses are being proposed as part of this development. This enables the developer to provide a variety of housing types which meets the need of the wider community. The street network as proposed, it could happen now through the subdivision process, but also that's subject to the requirements of the Nova Scotia Transportation Active Transit being met. The proposal includes a sidewalk plus active transportation trail, which would not be required under the subdivision bylaw. The sidewalk is required under the subdivision bylaw, but the active transportation trail is over and above the subdivision bylaw requirements. So issues which will be considered and reviewed include, but is not limited to, the adequacy of central water and wastewater systems to support the development, adequacy of existing proposed active transportation and automobile transportation networks, adequacy of recreation and community facilities, the linking of the proposed development with Ralston Drive, which is a gravel road owned by the province, stormwater management, and traffic. So I've left these notes in here just to let the public know that this we are working through the application, and there's a number of issues that we're aware of, and we are going to be investigating these and discussing with the developer. And when we reach the final report, we'll have kind of a policy response to all of these particular issues. So these are being looked at, amongst other things. So citizen engagement, the municipal plan strategy doesn't require a public information meeting. However, due to the scale of the development of PIM, a public information meeting has been scheduled. So we mailed out to people within 300 meters of the property, inviting them to this public information meeting tonight. And those people will also receive a letter and questionnaire, which will ask for comments on the proposed development. So this public information meeting really is just the start of the public engagement. As you can see from the table here, there will be a questionnaire mailed, as I just mentioned, to people within 300 meters of the site. And if after the meeting tonight you still have some questions or concerns, you can put those in writing to the municipality. And all of those are scanned and provided to Planning Advisory Committee and Council. So yeah, get your comments in writing so that we have those. We're also requesting comments from internal departments and external agencies. So as I mentioned, a traffic impact study has been prepared for this application, and that has been sent to Nova Scotia Transportation and Active Transit. So that's just an example of the kind of things that we seek comments on. Our own internal engineers make comments on the application, and we have our Parks, Rec and Culture Department will review and make comments on the application. There will be a staff evaluation where we'll review all of the policies under the municipal planning strategy, and also review all of those comments that have come in and prepare a final report for Planning Advisory Committee, and then the public hearing will be scheduled. And then that's at the point where the public also get to engage in the process, and council will approve or refuse the application. And this application, there is a right of appeal for anyone that wishes to appeal the decision of council. And That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. So that's the staff presentation. Now I'm going to invite the applicant. I guess Crystal and Aaron are up first. They're planners with Brighter Community Planning and Consulting to do a presentation. I don't know if Andrew's involved in that or if he's just here for questions, but over to you, Crystal.
All right, thank you. Before I jump into the presentation, could you enable share screen for me? And while you're doing that, John, I'd just like to introduce myself, Crystal Fuller, and Aaron Ferguson. We're both planners with a small company called Brighter Community Planning. Also joining us is Andrew for Site, and he will be speaking mostly to stormwater issues, but any other civil matters that might pop up. So, and Andrew's with Design Point, and the developer is here, Faisal Al-Hamadi. So that's who's here tonight. And just give me a second, I'll share my screen. And if you wouldn't mind just confirming that you're seeing my screen, that would be super. Thumbs up from somebody.
Yeah, no, we got it.
Thank you. Thanks. So the first question is always why here? And there's a variety of reasons. One, it's zoned appropriately and there's a municipal policy in place. But for those of you who already live in the community, you know that there's a whole bunch of stuff that makes this a very enticing place for people to live. You have your East Hants Aquatic Center and library. You have a variety of stores, retail locations. You have a trail system, and it's continuing to develop. And then you're obviously within a close proximity of Halifax. And I think anybody who's tried to purchase a house over the last few months to a year knows that housing is in desperate demand. And you're also lucky to have land that's available and appropriately zoned for development. So obviously you have a desirable community. You also have the municipalities doing some work to create a village core along the 214. So there's a variety of things that make this an attractive place for where people want to live, and so that this site seems to fit in with the policies and the directions that the municipality is going in. So the staff team's done a good job of giving you an overview. We're not going to repeat all of that. I do think it's important to note that this site is, as I mentioned, zoned for R2, which allows singles and 2 units, and could be developed now without going through any kind of a public process. What is exciting though about this site is that it has this walkable comprehensive development district, which allows for, and not allows for, but requires infrastructure and an approach that promotes walkability and a focus on active transportation. This is a real opportunity for the community and for this project to I think Rachel called it regular subdivision, and sort of move it in the direction of a more sustainable, walkable, human scale development. This zoning also allows by site plan 4plexes, convenience stores, and live work. So all of those things would allow an estimated approximate 440 units to go in there without going through a development agreement. And so it's a site that obviously will has the opportunity to connect through from the 214 and connect different neighborhoods that already exist. So as mentioned, the development agreement is really focused on a walkable comprehensive development district. So it's about making it a place where people can move around without having to use cars necessarily. So it promotes a variety of land uses and a variety of densities. So all that means is that you can have a variety of different housing forms, from single unit dwellings to duplexes to townhouses to apartment buildings. So the intention is to have that variety of density. It also makes sure that the roads can make logical connections. We've all been in those subdivisions where you get in it and you can't figure out how to get out. The proposed road links are intended to make more sense and be human scale, and in this case, it's more grid-like. Have really good infrastructure for pedestrians and bikes so that you feel comfortable with your kid driving a bike down the street that has that infrastructure. A comfortable streetscape, what that simply means is that it's a place that's pleasant to be on. So the design of the streets and the buildings make you want to be there as opposed to make you not want to be there. Also to promote the efficient use of municipal infrastructure. When you have pipes and roads, you want to make sure that you're using them for all they're worth, and that they're very expensive to install and maintain for the municipality. So using your infrastructure to its fullest ability is something every municipality must consider and does consider. And so the Walkable Community Development District has that intention behind it. And then linking residential and commercial areas. So you want to make sure that people have a place to walk and bike to. Can they get to the commercial area or your emerging village core in a way that is easy and safe? So the street layout is absolutely critical to this plan, and it's fundamental to making this fit with those WCDD policies, the walkable, comprehensive walkable. It's hard to say, comprehensive walkable development district. So you see, and again, Rachel did a good job of explaining this. There's this spine that goes, the spine that goes through the development, where you're going to have the infrastructure that really promotes the biking and the walking. And then you have the variety of other streets. These are the connection points down to Beach and Pine Hill, over to Elmwood and down to Ralston. This obviously doesn't link out to a road, but this is municipal land where we understand that there might be something happening at some point in the future. So again, the linkage isn't necessarily about roads, it's linking you to places where you need to get to. And the road would stop here, but it links you to this space, which is a public space. So these are the road standards that were referred to earlier. This is the multi-use pathway. So this would be biking and walking and strollering and rolling of any sort. It's 3-meter asphalt multi-use. It is, for those of you who bike, it's very exciting to see the separation, so that oftentimes you see bike lanes on the same roadway with in the same space, sharing the same space as roads. This, however, is not, which increases safety and comfort. And so there's street trees and a distance between the travel path for the cars. And then there's another street tree buffer area between the sidewalk. So this is what is being proposed for this to really fulfill that need to be a walkable, bikeable area, and also make it comfortable for people to be on the street through that main spine that we talked about, the Ralston extension. The other streets, all the other streets do not have that, but do have a sidewalk on one side, the street trees, and then the travel path for the vehicles. So that's the proposal at this point. There has been a detailed traffic study which the municipality is reviewing, and we look forward to the comments. There's a few interesting things about this. There's the two main accesses, so that's Ralston and Elmwood. And there's secondary accesses down through this area, which really aren't intended to be major access through to the site. There will be some traffic upgrades that are anticipated. The other interesting thing about traffic is that whatever your new interchange is called, I forget what it's called right now, will relieve some of the traffic that's already on here. This was considered as part of the traffic study, and this development, if you, it sort of offsets it. So whenever the new interchange goes in, any traffic reductions that's anticipated as a result of that will be offset by the development of this. And then at Elmwood, there at full build out, the traffic study does consider upgrades that will happen. I know there's maybe some concern that this will be a shortcutting route. Traffic calming measures, I think, will be a discussion point. Those are under the control of the municipality to figure out how they do that. Different municipalities can do traffic calming in different ways. If that ends up being the case, there's certainly, we're aware of that and open to discussions about how the municipality would like to deal with those. The pathways are equally important in the development that's trying to be walkable and more active transportation oriented. So here you can see the spine and all the streets. These are pathways. They're important because the blocks, you don't want them to be too long. So if you live here, you don't want people to have to go up and over and down. People can take walkways and get around the subdivision without having to just stay on the sidewalks. So this again is an attempt to promote that active transportation, that walkability factor. And the parks are important in that walkability factor. So as discussed, there's two main parks. The intention also with our multi-sites, which I'll show you in just a moment, will have significant green space around them and buffered areas to ensure that there's a smooth transition between densities. The intention of the parks is for them to obviously be within a reasonable walking distance for people to enjoy. So we'll continue to work with the municipality to understand exactly how they see these parks being used, whether or not there'll be playgrounds or there'll be passive recreation areas or they'll have seating or whatever the municipality determines is appropriate. And that will come as we move through the development agreement stage. So this is the different types of usage, and these are color coded. So if you are looking on your screen, hopefully this is showing up for you. The yellow are the 40-foot frontages, and they're around the edge to provide a good transition into the existing. Internal to it, to the subdivision is 34-foot wide frontage. These are all single unit dwellings. So same development form that's here, just a continuation of it with different minor variations in the frontage. The two red are the multi-unit sites. These are the duplex or semis, and there's an example of what that looks like. Semis on 18-foot meter frontages. That's compliant, I believe, with what's in your land use bylaw. So there's no change from what there's already. And then these are townhouses, and this would be up in this area, fronting on this street with a buffer to the back between them and the highway. And then you can see how the trail system and the parks and the streets and the spine all work together. So you've had a look at the multi-sites already. Just a couple more things that I would like to point out about this. The intention is to have some of the parking underground. So there's minimal surface parking, or sort of, it's about half and half. The intention is to have a lot of green space around that. That helps with stormwater management. It helps with livability, providing recreational land, attractiveness, all those sorts of things. There's a very large buffer here between this green area and the lots that are in front of it. And there's going to be some amenity space on, when I say amenity space, or recreational spaces for the residents on site. So a playground, some sort of a sports court, maybe a barbecue seating area. And the buildings were purposely placed in this location in order that the buildings, that you don't look into your neighbors. So you're not going to have this person looking into this person's building. It's all designed to provide space that people want to live in. And I saw a question, there is a 20-meter buffer between the lots on Vernon. So the intention is to provide a buffer, and development agreements often have requirements about lighting being not shown on adjacent properties, those sorts of things. So buffering is an important consideration. The other multifamily site, it's got 88 units. There's probably going to be a little bit of an adjustment here as we go through, just because we're a little tight to the lines here. Again, there's some underground parking, I believe, in this location, and there needs to be a water course buffer. There needs to be links to the recreation trails, and again, trying to minimize on surface parking. These are the buffer areas we were talking about, so you can see them outlined in green. The 10-meter here is between the developments and the highway, but when it's between the new development and existing development, that you can see that it's 20 meters. And this is a water course buffer. So I'd like to turn it over to Andrew to talk a little bit about stormwater management.
Sure thing. So we did a bit of a storm plan up just as a part of the application. And as you, the thick blue line, I guess you can't see my pointer, but the thick blue line is the existing water course where the majority of the site drains to today. That includes some culverts that bring water from the highway, from Highway 102 to the site. We also have 3 stormwater ponds planned. Those are the kind of light green circles. I think those will be like an open pond, just a not very deep pond that detains some water. And the purpose of those is to match the pre-development flows. That's a requirement of NSC, Department of Environment, and the municipality as well. We met with one of the staff from East Hants on site, and we understand there's been some flooding kind of more or less at the intersection of Pine Hill and Beach Street. So what we're looking at and kind of considering is the dark green line there that's shown is a trunk storm sewer to help improve that drainage at that intersection. So we need to work out a few more details on that, but that's what we're hoping to be able to do, is to make that better, because really what happens there, that's kind of a low point that captures quite a bit of water. The other part of this is by default, the upper roads that like Elmwood Drive extension above that flooded area is going to we'll be able to redirect some stormwater away from that kind of flooding area anyways. And the last thing I was going to mention is, Crystal mentioned this, but show the cross sections for the roads. They're going to be curb and gutter, which is kind of the new standard in East Hants. So curb and gutter with catch basins and pipe storm sewer, as opposed to open ditch like a lot of the roads are. Yeah, and that's it. We need to do detailed design and some topo survey to confirm some of these things, but this is what's being looked at right now.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And so for the non-engineers like me, I think what you're saying here is that after the development is constructed, the flows will not be any worse and may even be better than what they are right now once you put some of these other mitigation measures in place.
Yeah, that's in order to get the approvals, you need to match the pre-development flows anyways, and I think we would go a little beyond that to try to make the intersection where the flooding is a bit better.
Okay, great. I'm sure there'll be questions about that, so don't go too far. And this is a site plan, and so this is the overall sort of plan for the area. So we've just sort of walked you through it, and Rachel did the same thing. And it is a connection. There will be a connection from Ralston to Elmwood coming through, trying to have a transition between a seamless transition really between what's already existing and sort of matching that, allowing more density internal to the site, and then coming back out here to Ralston. Upgrades for transportation, we're still working on that, what's required, what's needed, what the impacts will be, but we think we have a pretty good handle on that. Having good parks, really having and promoting and supporting the direction set out by the municipal planning strategy in East Hants to really promote and build on this walkable notion of walkable communities, which for a variety of reasons is desirable, and often builds the type of community where people want to live. So cars aren't screaming through, and people feel comfortable on the streets, and their children feel comfortable on the streets. And also having a variety of housing forms, from multis to townhouses to duplexes to singles to smaller lot singles, so that there's a variety of price points, and which makes it accessible to people at different stages in their life and of different economic means. Again, the trails and the parkland connected all together. So I think that's probably everything at this point, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Crystal. I know there are some questions. Jody, do you want to walk us through the ones that we have so far?
Sure thing. So we have some that were answered asked in the Q&A, and there was also some that Rachel received by email this afternoon. So we'll attempt to get to all of them. So I guess, John, this is probably one for planning. What is the current minimum frontage permitted for a building lot?
Rachel,
So
do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, sorry. So it depends what the building lot is. If it's a single unit dwelling, we have our standards in the land use bylaw for minimum lot frontages for as of right developments. And the developer is proposing to pretty much meet those, except for the R1 zone, which is the single unit dwellings. They're proposing 2 frontages, 40-foot frontage and 34-foot frontage, and those equate to 12.2 meters and 10.3 meters. Our land use bylaw standard is 16 meters. However, through the Walkable Comprehensive Development District, we can negotiate the frontages, and we did actually do that with Clayton and Armco. So the developers' proposed frontages are consistent with what we had, what council had approved with the Armco and Clayton, but we will obviously look at those frontages and see if they make sense for this development. But there is, but council have looked at those frontages in the past.
Okay, thank you. So I think one of the slides showed parking for 72 spaces, but Rachel, you mentioned 88 units. So does that, is the difference just between underground parking and above ground parking? Could that have been
Yes.
the difference? Because we do have a standard for how many parking spaces per unit, correct?
We do in our land use bylaw, yes. We'll take a look at what's being proposed in terms of parking spaces and whether that makes sense for this development. But just, I guess the information that wasn't clear is that the development of those 2 multi-unit buildings, there was 88 units. There's 72 parking spaces underground in both, so 36 and 36. And then 72 above ground.
Okay,
For a total of 144 parking spaces for those 88 units.
great.
It's
Thank
the
you.
same with the other buildings as well. There is a combination of underground parking and above ground parking.
Perfect, thank you. So what steps will be taken to protect any animals that live in the area of this development?
I mean, we don't have any policies in place to protect animals. There is provincial legislation out there to protect protected species. I don't know what those protected species are, but there's nothing specific that the municipality has to do with regards to protecting any animals on the property.
And we would typically consult with Department of the Environment. In the past, I actually have pointed out areas where there are species at risk. So I assume we would do the same thing with this application in their consultation.
Okay, thank you. So has there been any considerations given to a greening strategy? So increased carbon emission impacts, pollution, environmental impacts due to forestry destruction?
We have nothing in our policies with regards to those particular points. I don't know if the applicant has any comments on that particular aspect.
Yes, I can say a few things about it. the buffering areas, excuse me, the buffering areas are obviously part of that. The municipality does have some conservation area policies, which we were mindful of when we developed the application. Also, on the multi-site, there's a significant amount of that that's trying to be left with vegetation on it, well, vegetation trees. So there has been thought to that as well around the water courses and the buffering, which is a requirement. And finally, retention as much as possible of wetlands. So in terms of natural systems, there's been a consideration of that, and we are attempting to protect as much as possible while still maximizing the site.
Okay, thank you. So John and Rachel, has there been any consultation with the Indigenous community?
No, unless we're made aware of any particular, any sites with any archaeology or any sites that need consultation with the Indigenous community, we wouldn't undertake that consultation. And in this case, we're not aware of anything at this point.
Okay, thank you. So some traffic questions. So back on, I think, Rachel, your drawings, well, both of the drawings that we saw, it looked like there was a potential set of lights being considered at the end of Elmwood Drive and the number 2 highway. So why would there be something considered there and not on the 214 where it connects with Rollston?
Crystal, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can take a.
Sorry, Crystal, over to you.
Yeah, I can take a shot at it and get you as far as we've got so far. So there has been a traffic study. So there is this particular specialty of traffic engineering, and there's a whole manual called the TAC, which helps guide traffic engineers and sets a standard. So when you're considering whether or not lights are required, there's something called a warrant. You have to meet that warrant to install lights. So they do an assessment of that. And when the traffic engineers, they look at the future growth and development of an area. So they don't just look at what is now, but they also project into the future based on what the development's going to be. So they've done that analysis for Ralston, and they did it at the other end at Elmwood. So some of the conclusions that they came to in the traffic study, which again is still under review by the different regulatory agencies, the municipality, and I still call it transportation because the new name is TAT, and I think it sounds foolish. So it's being reviewed by transportation and the municipality. What the traffic study, some of the conclusions that it came to, and I sort of mentioned this in the review that in my quick presentation, is that the new interchange is going to reduce some of the traffic on the 214, which this development will then pick up basically the slack. So at this point, there is no recommendation for, it doesn't meet the warrant essentially. And there is some upgrades, and I think it's a turning lane that's required there. At the other end, at the Elmwood end, it will meet the warrant when the development is built out. So it projects forward, it looks at the build out, and then at that time, it will meet the warrant. So that's what the study says at this point, and that's why that's what the recommendation, that's what the study says, so that's where we've landed on that at this point. But again, subject to review and further discussion.
Okay, thank you. So a couple questions around flooding and Pine Hill Drive, and that it happens on both ends of Pine Hill, or I guess not just the corner. So will what we do, if this development goes forward, will that help the current flooding issues on Pine Hill?
I'll answer that as best I can. We met with on site there. The focus was kind of on that intersection of Pine Hill and Beach, like I mentioned, but I'm happy to meet with some of the residents out there to explain a bit better what goes on in terms of flooding. And the intent is to not make it any worse and to make it a bit better if we can. And I think that's possible to make it better. So I don't have a whole lot more to say than that, but we're definitely happy to meet with whoever the right person is and and talk about that on site.
Jody, if
Okay.
I could just
Yes,
make
go
a
ahead,
comment as well,
Rachel.
is I guess just a reminder to the public at this point that these are all things that we're working through right now, and we don't always have the answers for everything at this point. But I just, you know, as you can see from what Andrew and Crystal are saying, they are working on some of these issues. So, you know, we'll probably have more information as we go through the application. But right now, this is kind of where we are in terms of, you know, the stormwater review and all those other things.
Great. And, you know, this just adds to, you know, how important, I guess, these questions are to residents and to the municipality as things that need to be figured out, right? So it's good to hear from people what their questions are. Will the municipality take a role in overland water mitigation? I don't know what that is, but Andrew, I'm hoping you do.
Well,
I assume that's about flooding.
I figured it was water, so
I mean,
I guess, John, maybe I should.
well, the thing that popped into my mind is that we do have a lot grading and drainage bylaw. So as the subdivision plans come forward, in addition to sort of dealing with the larger stormwater issues, drainage from each lot has to be, Andrew can explain this a lot better than I can. It has to be thought about before the subdivision and before each lot is built upon, so that you get drainage away from all the dwellings, and so that you don't create a problem for your immediate neighbor as you develop your lot. Andrew, any further comments on?
Yeah, that's basically it. If we're talking about the proposed lots, then yes, there'll be subdivision grading plans that have to be done for each lot. That'll show clearly how the stormwater gets away from each house and where it goes. And that's required in order to get the building permit. The existing houses around Pine Hill are a different story. They're already there now. So I'm not sure if there is grading plans for those or not.
Well, we have a few Pine Hill residents that would be very interested in chatting about the issues, according to the questions and answers, or the questions here. So, John, anybody that would be interested in chatting, I would assume should contact our planning department.
Mhm. Yeah, Rachel is the planner on this file, so route your
Okay.
questions through her for sure.
Yeah, so planning@eastants.ca, or now you're going to test me, 902-883-6.
For me?
Or no, for our planning line.
I don't
Okay, we'll put that up at the end. And eastants.ca too. You can check out our contact and information on there too. So anybody who wants to chat about this.
Can I
sorry,
just add one more thing about overland stormwater? It's the intent. So as Andrew said a couple times, that when you do these proposals, what you do is you submit them as a totality, and then you work through the more detailed approaches. So it's not that we as a team don't know the answers, it's that we're working with the municipality to get to the right answers and to fully understand what all the issues are. So that's why this meeting tonight is so important, and we're here listening carefully, and there's people taking notes on both sides here. But the intention of the developer is to comply with the requirements of the municipality, and not to and to make this a development that does not cause problems for any adjacent neighbors or inside the development. That suits nobody. So all the requirements will be met. There's engineers who specialize in stormwater management. That's why Andrew's here tonight, who are going to look at this and work with the team at the municipality to sort of sort through those details. And I'm absolutely sure that when Rachel takes this to PAC, that there's going to be a lot more detail that's going to be as part of that, and that's our intention. So maybe I know it's hard to ask for patience when people have been inside with COVID for 18 months, but this is just part of the process, and we're happy to participate in this and feed the information to them as we get it and fully understand it.
That's great. Thank you.
And Jody,
Yes.
the number for the planning telephone number,
Yeah.
902-883-3387.
Thank you. Thank you. We do know our telephone number. Just not on the top of our head sometimes. So should this proposal go forward, what is the estimated time of start and finish? So John, I guess first, how long typically does something like this take to get through our our planning?
Well, an application like this would, and especially right now, we're actually quite busy in the planning department. You'd be looking at, 8 months plus, depending on what the reviewing agencies find,
Okay.
from start to finish. But
And then
the
I guess-
actual build out, that's entirely at the developer's discretion. So
Okay.
And I can take a crack at that. I mean, build out and sales and development are obviously very market based. And 3 years ago, nobody would have thought we would have probably had the hot markets that we have in Nova Scotia right now. And in where I live in rural Nova Scotia, things going for over asking price was unheard of, 18 months ago. So the hope from the developer, I think, would be this might be a 10-year build out. The development agreement usually has some language about this. So I'm sure more details will be provided through the development agreement process.
yeah, actually, I didn't mention that, but for example, in both the Clayton and Armco, which I guess would be the most comparable developments we have, I think were the timeline is 10 years in those, Rachel, both of them.
I think it may have been longer than 10 years, maybe 15.
So
Yeah.
we don't think now that either of those developments is going to take as long as we were originally thinking, and probably this one as well, because you're right, there's such a need for housing out there.
Great. So just a comment for us to take away. So a 4-story apartment building will tower above or beside a single unit home, even with that 20-meter buffer between the building and, say, Vernon Court. So just a bit of concern there from a resident for us to take into consideration. So I think we talked a little bit about stormwater management, and more will come as we progress further down the process, should we get there.
Well, actually, Jody, that one it seemed to ask what are the components of a stormwater management plan. And so Andrew could probably talk, I guess, in general about, the steps they go through and what the end plan looks like.
Yeah, like I mentioned, there's the road system will be curb and gutter. There'll be catch basins along the gutter spaced at 100 meters or thereabouts. There'll be a storm pipe in the street that's buried that collects the water that comes into the catch basins. And then from there, we'll go to the stormwater management ponds. And then from there, it makes its way into the water course. That's in a nutshell. That's kind of how it works. So the municipality would own all that infrastructure.
Okay, so we have a resident from Pine Hill who just wants to know more simply if the municipality will work with the developer to do better than not making the flooding worse.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, as soon as this proposal came forward, Jesse Holzman, our Director of Infrastructure and Operations, jumped on the phone right away to talk to the developer because he knows there's an issue in that area. And I think we have every intention of trying to make it a better situation than it is, not just not making it worse. And Andrew kind of expressed some, willingness on the part of the applicant to cooperate in that regard. So I think, as we get further along, we will have a better idea of what level of improvement we can make.
Okay. A resident from Vernon Court says there's zero drainage incorporated into that street, I guess, or that area. So they had to add a French drain to their property. So I guess drainage and stormwater is an important topic in that area. So John, will the new infrastructure help bring tax dollars to the municipality?
Yeah, and nothing's free though. So yes, there will be more tax dollars coming to the municipality, but now we'll have more residents that need services, more streets to maintain. So what we do, especially with these larger applications, is by the time Rachel gets to her final staff report, there will be some financial analysis there to show what the net revenue or cost is to the municipality of a development like this.
Okay, thank you. So just a concern from residents that they're very concerned about I guess the intense scale of this project and the incredible destructive impact on our community. So that's sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Well, I guess just a comment to say that we there are a number of aspects of, like we look through this in detail. We look at the saying about the scale, we look at, you know, whether there's sufficient services, municipal water services. We look at the traffic along with that transportation infrastructure, and all. We look at parkland. So there are a number of different elements that we look at. Despite this being a bigger scale than some of the other developments in the area, we do look at all of those details to see that it makes sense for the municipality.
And nothing's
would
been
go-
approved at this point either, right?
Right.
This is kind of the exploration.
I
path
go a
that
little
we
bit
go
further too, Jody. I would say this, that, you know, yes, right now it's an undeveloped piece of land, and people are looking at it as such and comparing, you know, post-development, what that would look like. And if they consider that destruction, you know, I guess that's their opinion. But this land was put in our serviceable boundary more than 20 years ago. So, you know, I kind of put the world on notice that at some point we were going to entertain development on this land. In fact, as Rachel said in her presentation, you could do it as a right without any sort of public process, just going through the subdivision process for R2 development. So, you know, I get the comment. I hear it that, you know, we're now converting this piece of land, which is undeveloped, to developed land. But, you know, that was built into our planning, like I say, more than 20 years ago.
And if I might just add to that as well. So it's always tough when you've had a piece of land next to you and it's been vacant. You're used to walking your dogs on it. Your kids have you know, forts in the trees and that sort of thing. And so we understand that, we really do. The land is probably can accommodate as of right about 440 units, you know, give or take, something like that. So if we just went right through the subdivision process, then it wouldn't have some of the active transportation elements, which I think are so exciting about this proposal. Wouldn't have necessarily the same flexibility to work with the land in the way that allows additional buffering and protective measures. So we're looking at 440-ish, thereabouts. It could be less, it could be slightly more if it was developed as of right. With this proposal, I think the number is around 660. I'm just looking at Aaron. So it is denser than what would be as of right, but there are other flexibilities that we believe offer a benefit to the community. The other piece of this is that you are trying to create a village center, Handy, and I'm very interested to see what that looks like as you move through that process. Part of having that village center is having feet on the street and having people live nearby who can go and walk and bike and travel to that. So we believe this development can be really positive to create that kind of village atmosphere that you're trying to create. And it's part of what makes this area attractive to folks.
Thank you. So a question around building out the spine. So is it mandatory for the Elmwood spine extension to be built before any construction is done so that there's two entrances while the development is being built?
I think the intention is to build on the Ralston Drive area of the development first, and then eventually work their way to Elmwood Drive, the other end. So no, that the intent, unless Crystal can correct me, the intent is to build on one end of the developments first, not to connect all the way through before anything gets built.
Crystal's just going to refer to her her information. Oh, Crystal, we can't hear you. Oh yeah, you're muted. Oh.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my mouse stopped working for a second, so the mute button wasn't responding to me. Yeah, so on the Ralston side drive, there is an intention, at least at this point, to allow some of this to go by as of right and to really focus on that end, and then work on the development agreement for the remainder of the lands.
Okay. So will there be access through the existing McKees lane for the development?
That's a private road,
Okay.
and there's no intention, as far as I'm aware, for the developer to use that as access. That's adjacent to the two multi-unit buildings, and there's no planned throughway through that private road.
Okay. So we mentioned earlier about the increase in tax dollars for the municipality, but also increase in the demand for services. But John, will some of these tax dollars bring funding for police?
Yes, of course. I mean, whether it's the 400 or 600 dwelling units, there will be obviously quite a bit of tax revenue that comes from the development, but I mean, there will also then be more residents to protect too. So, you know, we're basically a nonprofit organization. The money we take in taxes, we spend in services.
Okay. So we have a question. Does anyone on this panel live in the affected area?
No.
I don't know.
No. But we do have counselors who represent the area. I believe that are online with us this evening. So they're hearing your concerns and your questions. So that's important. And we're listening to your concerns. So a question around the walkable comprehensive development district. So it allows for commercial. So does that only mean like convenience stores, or is it more high density commercials as seen like around Larry Utech in Bedford?
So this development doesn't include any commercial land. The WCDD, Walkable Comprehensive Development District policies does enable commercial to be considered as part of the proposal. And we saw that with the Clayton Developments application. They have some commercial uses inside their development and then also along the new interchange. So that's been incorporated in that one, but this one doesn't have that. This is a residential development with some open space and trails and not including commercial.
We always like to see that integration, but in this case, the developer doesn't have any frontage on Highway 2 or 214. So it didn't seem to be a whole lot of commercial potential with the site.
Yeah, just to add to that, the only mention really, and it's not commercial, is more of sort of work live with, again, not to keep talking about COVID, but it's on everybody's mind these days. The way we work is changing, is shifted. Will it shift completely back? So will there be opportunities for people to have more of a home office type thing? There's that flexibility that's possible and maybe desirable. And so it's maybe contemplated, but certainly no commercial is proposed in here. It's really a residential focus.
Okay, so was there a store mentioned earlier that somebody picked up on? So no, okay. Okay. So some questions that we received by email.
I have those, Jody.
Okay. Did you want me to ask them for you? So, or ask them to you?
I can go
ahead.
through them.
Okay,
Yeah,
you go ahead.
So we have received some emails with questions. So I'm just going to go through some of those now. Some of them may already have been addressed through this meeting. So there was a question about augmenting existing wastewater infrastructure, and the current infrastructure is barely sufficient to deal with the current load. But our own engineers have confirmed that there is sufficient capacity to deal with this development. There may be a need to build a new lift station. I don't know if Andrew can shed any light on that particular aspect, but you know, all of those things we'll take care of, and there is capacity right now. How is localized flooding being addressed? Well, we've already talked about the stormwater plan that has been developed there. 70 detached homes are planned for the corner of Pine Hill Drive and Beach Street, and also for the areas around the Pine Hill Drive, and some concerns that maybe should be single unit dwellings. I think Crystal mentioned that part of the development is going to be built as of right to start with. So phase 1 is the 70 detached units that, I'm sorry, I'm just looking over my shoulder at the plan here. So those is the land around Pine Hill Drive and Beach Street. So those are, as of right now, those are 2 units. So those semi-detached units are as what is permitted right now. and then there's a question here about trying to exit the subdivision proving very difficult during peak times. Well, the traffic impact study has looked at the connection to the existing network of Highway 2 and Highway 214, and that's being looked at by the municipality and the province, the study that's been prepared by the consultant. So that was one of the sets of questions. I'm just going to move on to the next set of questions. The question about the non-disturbance areas, so I highlighted those on the plans in the presentation. Sorry, excuse me, just I'm not quite as eloquent as you, Jody, when reading through the questions.
No worries, Rachel, you're doing well. What
And then-
about Elmwood? So the existing part of the Elmwood subdivision, is there anything planned to change in there?
I'm not quite sure I follow.
No, like the existing subdivision, there's no.
Stays as is?
I mean, it's essentially built out, so no,
Okay.
other than the road connection to the new development.
Okay. Sorry, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question about the apartment buildings. If they're not constructed for 5 years, can the builder change their location at any time? So that depends on how the development agreement is written, as to whether, you know, how tightly the development agreement is written and approved by council. Sometimes we allow some flexibility to move buildings slightly, just to kind of accommodate when people get on site and start building and what makes sense on site. But we're not at the stage where we've kind of tightened that down as to the wording of the development agreement. I think the intent is to build those apartment buildings as per the plans that I showed earlier. And if that changes, then we'll have, you know, amended plans before the public hearing, but that's what we're looking at right now.
Okay. Did you have any other emailed questions, Rachel?
No,
Ones that came in later?
there was,
No, I think you've covered those.
okay.
No, sorry, there was one more around foot traffic. So, yeah, so we've talked about vehicular traffic, but foot traffic. So I guess that's the two different kind, the sidewalks and the active transportation trail to get people, you know, through the subdivision to wherever they want to go.
Yeah, so pedestrians are actually, and people who want to bike or skate or whatever kind of active transportation to move around are taken care of quite nicely in this development. There's the sidewalk and the AT trail right the way through that spine, which is over and above what the subdivision bylaw would allow. And then there's trails through the development as well, as that were indicated on the plan that was shown earlier.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up the questions. So this is a final call for some questions for this public information meeting. I have a comment from an attendee. So the developer and the municipality should probably consider, you know, further consultation with the Indigenous community in the future, since we are on unceded land. So that's just something to pass along from someone. So I have another comment here. Worried about traffic and the speed that people could potentially be driving from Rollston right through to the existing Elmwood subdivision. So I think there was some discussion earlier about some potential traffic calming measures. Is there anything that someone could elaborate on around that?
So the traffic study did suggest that traffic calming may want to be looked at through the kind of the main spine through the development, and our own internal engineers have mentioned that as well. So we'll have that discussion and see what makes sense for the new road through the developments, the kind of the road from Elmwood to Ralston Drive. I don't know if the person commented is specifically talking as well about the existing Elmwood road.
I think it's all, yeah, I think it's what happens now and what's going to happen in the future. So I would assume it's both.
Okay, so we can deal with what's on the development site through this development agreement. If there's any issues of kind of people speeding right now for the existing subdivision, then that would, the RCMP can deal with kind of speeding issues. This development won't improve any kind of existing issues with speeding.
Okay, thank
Right,
you.
but as we become aware of those things, and I think one of the issues, kind of a growing awareness in municipalities, is about traffic calming through existing residential neighborhoods. So although, you know, this development agreement in and of itself isn't going to require or prompt any changes on the existing Elmwood Drive, that's a conversation that, you know, I think will get picked up, especially if there is more traffic on that street.
Will there be any sort of covenants in place around upkeep of property, that kind of thing?
No, well, the developer may have some, but the municipality doesn't recognize private covenants anyway. We just
Okay.
regulate through our bylaws. And we do have a, you know, the dangerous or unsightly premises provision of the MGA that we use for, I guess, properties that get particularly bad. But we also don't have a minimum standards bylaw in East Hants. With some municipalities go further, I guess, in terms of, you know, telling people to cut their grass or paint their house, that kind of thing. We don't have a bylaw like that. We do, you know, if there's a house that's a yard full of garbage, or the house is falling down, or, you know, there's serious maintenance or safety issues, we do deal with those through our the provisions of the dangerous or unsightly premises.
Okay. So back to wastewater management and the infrastructure that's currently in place. So if it's sufficient, why have there been sewer backups in the area? I think specific to Pine Hill, and why do residents need to have backflow prevention devices installed on their properties?
I think that's, I don't know exactly the history there, but I think that's as a result of the flooding. I think the area sort of floods and gets into the pump station that's there and backs up into the gravity system and ultimately into the houses. That's my guess.
And we'll have more comments from our own infrastructure and operations department, who know more about that area
Right.
as we move along.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So a comment, I guess, more than a question. So increased taxes could provide money to fund more police. Should, I guess, more traffic issues come to head. So that was really just a comment there. So that's all the questions I have in our Q&A, John. So I will pass it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Jody, and to our participants from both the developer and members of the public that chose to join us tonight. We really do appreciate your involvement and the questions and comments. They definitely help staff as we go through these things, because nobody knows your community better than, you know, obviously the people that live there. Rachel, why don't you just come back on for a second and talk about what folks should expect in terms of the next communication from us and next steps here.
So the next communication will be the questionnaire, and just will provide an opportunity for any members of the public to provide their comments in writing. Those questionnaires will be sent out to the same people that we sent the individual invite letters for the public information meeting tonight, and we identify properties within 300 meters of the application site. So I think it's important for people to note that if you have comments, to put them in writing and send them over to us, so that we have those in front of us. We can kind of go through all those issues that you have.
Okay, I think that's a wrap for tonight. So again, you can follow on easthants.ca. There's a tab on the front page of our website where you can follow all planning applications, actually, any new reports that get posted there, and information about meetings and so on. So with that, I am going to call it to a close for this evening. Thank you, everyone. Good night.